Federalist 42 was written by James Madison, and if you remember, starting Federalist 41, he wanted to defend some of the authority that was given to the federal government. Here, he's going to defend the authority given to the federal government in regulating commerce, not only between United States, what will become the United States, and the rest of the world, but also regulating commerce between the states. Because it would be a mistake if you don't have an authority checking to make sure that everybody plays by the rules. Because what will happen is, let's say one state might import something and then smuggle it to other states and make more money this way. So there's got to be one person or one authority that will actually regulate commerce. And also, when you're dealing with other nations, if you are not dealing with them as one central government, one federal government, you'll have 13 different states dealing with nations. You'll have 13 sets of treaties. You'll have 13 of everything. And that will create chaos, and then that'll bring distrust between the states. And sooner or later, these states will go to war against one another. So it's better to let one entity, the federal government, deal with all the nations of the world. Whether it's sending ambassadors, sending ministers, sending consuls, opening up embassies, opening up consulates, all of these, it's better to be in the hands of one authority so that they do whatever they do, it's uniform. You don't have multiple rules for everything. So for the most part in this paper, that's what he's going to be defending, and also a few other things in the Constitution, Article 1, and as we go through it, you'll see it. And some of it has to do with minting coins, immigration, naturalization, because you don't want 13 different forms of naturalization. You want to have a uniform law that would apply to everybody. This way, when a person becomes the citizens of the United States, they will be considered the citizen of the United States everywhere else, in every other state. So let me start reading this. And there's another thing that he talks about, which has to do with issue of slavery. And they're going to try to put a stop into importation of slavery. Let me read it and I'll explain more. All right. James Madison, January 22nd, 1788. The second class of powers lodged in the general government consists of those which regulate the intercourse with foreign nations. Remember, intercourse means relationship with other nations. Our foreign policy. To wit, to make treaties, to send and receive ambassadors, other public ministers and councils, to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations, to regulate foreign commerce, including a power to prohibit after the year 1808 the importation of slaves, and to lay an intermediate duty of $10 per head as a discouragement to such importations. This class of powers forms an obvious an essential branch of the federal administration. If we are to be one nation in any respect, it clearly ought to be in respect to other nations. The power to make treaties and to send and receive ambassadors speak their own propriety. Both of them are comprised in the Articles of Confederation, with this difference only that the former is disembarrassed by the plan of the Convention of an exception under which treaties might be substantially frustrated by regulations of the states, and that a power of appointing and receiving other public ministers and councils is expressly and very properly added to the former provision concerning ambassadors. The term ambassador, if taken strictly, as seems to be required by the second of the Articles of Confederation, comprehends the highest grade only of public ministers, and excludes the grades which the United States will be most likely to prefer where foreign embassies may be necessary. And under no latitude of construction will the term comprehend consuls. Yet it has been found expedient and has been the practice of Congress to employ the inferior grades of public ministers and to send and receive consuls. It is true that where treaties of commerce stipulate for the mutual appointment of consuls, whose functions are connected with commerce, the admission of foreign consuls may fall within the power of making commercial treaties, and that where no such treaties exist, the mission of American consuls into foreign countries may perhaps be covered under the authority given by the 9th Article of the Confederation to appoint such civil officers as may be necessary for managing the general affairs of the United States. But the admission of the consuls into the United States, where no previous treaty has stipulated it, seem to have been nowhere provided for. A supply of the admission is one of the lesser instances in which the Convention have improved on the model before them. But the most minute provisions become important when they tend to obviate the necessity or the pretext for gradual and observed usurpations of power. A list of the cases in which Congress have been betrayed or forced by the defects of the Confederation into a violation of their chartered authority would not a little surprise those who have paid no attention to the subject, and would be no inconsiderable argument in favor of the new Constitution, which seems to have provided no less studiously for the lesser than the more obvious and striking defects of the old. One of the things that you will see here, especially in this paper, you see that Madison quotes from the Articles of Confederation, and he says that the language there, it's not clear. So when we are dealing with foreign nations, when we are sending ambassadors or other ministers or consuls there, the way the Articles of Confederation, our old Constitution, looks at it, it's murky, it's not clear. And this applies also to when other nations send us ambassadors or send us representatives, ministers, or things like that. He says this issue creates a headache for us. Now, one thing you have to remember that when the Federalist Papers were being written, when the Constitutional Convention actually took place, both John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were ministers. They were not called ambassadors. John Adams was a minister to England, and Thomas Jefferson was minister to France. I have already mentioned this about Thomas Jefferson because I said Thomas Jefferson sent a lot of books to James Madison for him to study the old confederations and also to study the world history. At the same time, John Adams was ministers to England. And you will see during the reading of these Federalist Papers, you'll see that one of the reasons that they say we need to unite is that Britain and France are not respecting our ministers, because they just say, well, you guys are 13 different states, you're weak, why should we respect or pay any attention to what your ministers say here? That was one of the points that was brought up both during the convention, Constitutional Convention, and during the writing of the Federalist Papers, that if we don't unite, not only we won't be able to make progress like we can if we do unite, and also our ambassadors or our ministers overseas in other countries will be laughed at, will not be respected. And this is something that we should not tolerate.